So we're going to use the time from now till lunch for our debate. Still, it's not that much time considering the whole range of things that we've got to say. So let's, as quickly as possible, put our points and ask questions, please. It'd be great if you said where you're coming from and perhaps who you're going to put the question specifically to. I'm encouraging our panel to all chip in on each other as well, and that way we'll get a really dynamic debate going. Don't worry, you're not going to insult anyone, but let's speak as plainly as we can, because often we find that you can get more points into the second or the minute that way. As you've noticed, we have another guest at our table here. I'd like to welcome Charlie Hicks. Charlie Hicks is a fabulous greengrocer who gets passionate about all sorts of things, and someone tipped me off once that he has an artichoke tattooed on his body. Is that true? He does, it's on his arm. There we are. It's a globe. You showed it to Jenny Murray. It's a globe. You wouldn't really want a Jerusalem artichoke tattooed on your arm, would you? And as you hear his voice, he reminds me that it was a long time ago, but if you don't know that Charlie Hicks supplies fantastic restaurants right across the UK with his fantastic products, and used to have shops in Hay, Bristol and Reigate, you'll probably recognise the voice from Radio 4's Veg Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Hicks. That's the formal welcoming. We've already welcomed our other three guests. The debate is the three of them together, and then later on this afternoon I'll be talking to Charlie Hicks about his business. So first of all, who's going to kick off this debate with a question or a point? Who's going to, earlier on when there were loads of them, who's going to kick it off as to where we are now? Lady over here, you're going to have to put up with me running around this place.
Thank you. It's Chris Williams from Fig Leaf Media. What we've been talking about this morning and hearing is really how we're changing our habits. That's us, we're presumably adults. What about the effects on sort of the youngsters, the children, and how early should we be starting to form their shopping habits?
David, how would you like to start with that? How do we change the habits of the young? And then Simon, you might like to come into that as well.
Most habits are, one of their characteristics is that they're unreflective. And that on a day-to-day basis you don't notice them. And the reason we tend to naturally focus on children when we're thinking about where habits come from is because they're still having to work everything out. And I think we fall into a way of thinking which says something like, if we can somehow guide or instruct children in a different way, that they will then forge new or different habits. I think there are two reasons for being kind of anxious about that. One is that, and some of this is back to the kind of neuroscience, children are receiving massive volumes of input from all sorts of sources. And if one message from one source conflicts with all the others, back to my sort of little diagram, it bounces off. You know, they will discount it, or it won't fit with the wider set of things that they are hearing and learning. And I think the other thing is that habits can in fact be changed in adults, and that I think might be a better place to start, because children, particularly in their food, eating, shopping behaviours, do look to adults, and if one message from one adult says, well, you should do it differently, but everyone else is doing something else, then it will bounce off. And therefore, I think we need to be focusing more, not so much on kind of teaching or guiding or instructing children, as modelling in a much broader way the kinds of things that we think might be better for them. Now, some of that, and then I'll shut up, it is certainly to do with kind of reducing advertising to children. I think that's got to be done. I think the UK is way behind some leading countries on that. Some of it will come from, if you take your child to the people's supermarket, then that's a lesson they will begin to learn. But I think it is a much bigger kind of system level challenge, that whilst children continue to be bombarded with consumerist messages, that it's going to be very, very hard to change the shopping habits. And sorry, there's one other very brief thing, which is to do with the confidence of adults in the company of children. So there's been a lot of work showing that one of the reasons that lower income people in particular tend not to make new food choices is because they're not confident that the children will actually eat the food that they then buy. So they get kind of narrower and narrower in their choices. So I think things which could help children feel more confident about food, whether it's through the things they choose to eat or the things that they choose to buy, could be a way around that.
Simon, our children are also bombarded by messages from government, aren't they, from the various different governments around the UK. There's the 5 a day campaign, but lots of others as well. From the research you've done, do children notice those kind of government health campaigns and what teachers say, or do they react in the way that the rest of us do when they actually get into a supermarket?
If you interview children, and I must admit I haven't done much of this, but I've took the other parts of the business that I sort of work for have done. One, their receptiveness to advertising is phenomenally higher than adults, and so they will be able to replay stuff, and you see that happening in store when they're making choices. They're much more influenced by branded advertising than others, and I totally agree with David's view about particularly advertising to children, but what they're picking up, of course, on is advertising generally. Second point is, I want to pick on is David's point about modelling. If you talk to children, they'll be able to replay to you stories about green, environmental issues, climate change, all that kind of stuff. We're doing an extremely good job in schools about educating children about these issues. Sadly, however, they go out into the real world and none of that plays out.
Is that because of peer pressure?
No, you go to people driving Range Rovers, people are buying plastic food in Tesco's, etc., etc. So the modelling that they're seeing, they're hearing the theory in school, they don't see it played out so it's our responsibility as adults to model the behaviour that we want to see. It's not the responsibility to the same extent of government and children. It's our own responsibility. It goes to the point we were talking about earlier on about whether Tesco's should force us to buy eco, but bollocks. It's our job is to take responsibility to buy these products, to go shopping in these kinds of stores rather than Tesco's. It's not government's.
Kate, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, we're about to launch what we grandly call our outreach programme. That means we're probably going to the end of the road. Because one of the things that we've been lucky enough to help with is an organisation called Corum's Fields. For those of you who know some history, Mr. Coram in the Victorian days set up the first foundling hospital in London, and there is a park literally at the end of our road where only adults can go in if they're accompanied by children. So it's a fantastic place. They've been hit by governmental cuts, and we have agreed to take over with our members' gardening club, because nobody's got a garden, so we've got a gardening club. All of their fruit, all their vegetables and herb gardens. And our deal is we get that for nothing, but we will work with them on their outreach programmes with children, because they have those already set up, and we've got one of those kind of relationships going. Again, this is like, why wouldn't you? Not why would, why wouldn't you do that? It sounds fantastic. And that's what our members want, because they want to do this bit of where does the food come from and how do you model it, and how do you model that you can then take it somewhere else and eat it. I suppose for me, my biggest concern that I have, and it goes back about the disconnect between what we say and what we see, is the people aged under 25 who come from relatively low income and poor educational backgrounds that we get in the store. We get a lot of these through government helping schemes, young offenders, and that they have no knowledge about what food is, because their aspiration is to buy it in plastic, shiny, to buy it new. And Actor, you saw, he's got a guy he works with, and they're both being trained as greengrocers. Very noble profession. And the other guy is Nelson, who's Portuguese. He's homeless. We employed Nelson, and I always mispronounce Calvanero. Calvanero. We had a beautiful.
One means a horse and one means a cabbage.
It's the black cabbage we've got. Yeah. Lloyd wouldn't come anywhere near us. And we we had this in, and I said to him, what I'd like you to do now is to do the recipe, because we do little recipe cards for things that people may not know. So Nelson and I spent an hour trawling to find the easiest recipe in the world. We did all of these things. He wrote it out. He even spelt it right. It was fantastic. And at the end of his shift, I gave him a bag of all the ingredients that he had just written down. Yeah, from the fresh pasta, you name it, even down to the salt and pepper, because I knew he was at a hostel that night. And I said, go and make it in your kitchen. And he went, no. I said, Nelson, we've just spent a bloody hour doing this. I want you to make it, because then tomorrow you can tell the people what it's like when you bought it. And he was lacking the confidence to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though we had spent, an hour going through it. And I think we need to still do some more work, even just with younger people, young adults, to get that confidence across.
Yeah, and there is more of a campaign, isn't there, to get more cooking into the schools.
Yes.
And certainly into secondary.
Crucial, isn't the problem is that we don't have proper old-fashioned home economic lessons in schools. 12 years ago, when he was 8, my son said, I'm doing what was called food technology. I was very excited because I assumed they were going to teach him to cook. He came home, I said, what did you do? He said, we designed the packaging for a sandwich in a motorway service station.
That does vary, does it not?
I took him as a job and let him have 2 puddings. I thought he has to learn that food is pleasure. And that's what happens. He's now just gone off to university. Yesterday, his first day, he went to Chinatown and Neil's yard Derek to do some food shopping. He's into it. And I know that's not available to everybody, but we have to get back to teaching people to cook in schools because we don't do it at home.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a difference in different parts of the UK. I think I'm looking at Simon Billsborough, Welsh Government. You do cooking in comprehensive schools, don't you? Definitely.
Yeah, the two things we've got a big...
Sorry, keep talking now.
Two of the key differences about education in Wales is firstly we've got a big education for sustainable development and global citizenship programme which is embedding sustainable development and global citizenship across the curriculum. And the second thing, we have the foundation phase for early years where I think 30% of lessons are taught in the outdoor environment and there's just been a recent evaluation showing how much more effective that process is in terms of embedding learning outcomes into children at that age than formal teaching in the classroom.
And does that include eating? It does, doesn't it? Don't they do a bit of cooking and eating there as well?
Possibly.
They do a bit of foraging stuff. Simon, thank you very much.
Hi, yes. I think it depends where you are. I'm really lucky, speaking as a mum, that my kids go to these schools where they've got their own vegetable gardens, they're growing their own food, and when my son does cooking, he really does cooking and, he brings it home at night, but I don't think all schools do that. But I think a lot of it is from home as well. I've got a little girl who loves the vegetables, loves the fruit, and a little boy who doesn't like his vegetables, so we encouraged him to grow a few vegetables himself, and now he's quite keen. The other thing I've noticed just listening to previous talks is there seems to be everything you were talking about up there. I'm thinking, yeah, we do that, but we live in a rural community and we're very lucky in that we can provide our own food, we make our own sausages, but I'm well aware that there is a divide between the rural community and the cities and towns, and I think a lot of it boils down to building up those communities, as you've done with your people's supermarkets within the cities and towns, sort of educate throughout communities.
I think you're right there, and one of the joys that we've got is I look at these things as opportunities. I try and be one of the most positive people I can be. And, there's nothing cheered me up more than when Cypher brought in his dad, who runs a local curry house, to make us dal. And I actually thought we'd crack something then. The problem is then Cypher's dad wrote out the recipe in Bengali, and we had to send one of our chefs off to buy it. It's like, I don't know what I'm buying. But that was fine. I mean, we got it all. And I think it's those kinds of things that we have to knock away on being healthy eating, being white and middle class. We have to knock away that having these choices is actually the preserve of a certain type of person. And to be frank, that's one of the reasons why I was so excited by a supermarket model. Because it's for everybody, but what we try and do is actually build upon it, as opposed to being somebody, a kind of whole food place where you go and eat lentils and knit your own socks or something. Come off it, we're in London and you can get mud 10 yards down the street, and I said Nelson's homeless, and one of our other guys is a Somali refugee. Those are real life people, and we, as a city, as you say, are different to an urban community, a rural community. But what we're trying to do, and that's why places like Lambeth Country Show is so great, is actually bring the two together, and that's where I think we can learn more things from. Is how you bring the two together.
Okay, there was a smile on the face here of Steve, who's got some examples of Cardiff.
Yes, Steve Garrett, Riverside Market. We tried all kinds of. Part of what we do is work in schools because we're trying to build up the customer base, for the future, of course. And just a quick story about something that really worked. A colleague of mine had this idea: let's take sports celebrities into schools and tell the kids what they eat, because these are real role models for fitness. And so we found an agency. We didn't have to pay too much. We got gold medal winning swimmers, young people who talked to the kids in school, and it was unbelievable. I mean, the level of attention they got. And when they did the pot noodle challenge, and these, they showed their medals and said why they eat what they eat, and the feedback at the end, the kids were saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to tell my mum to only buy fresh veg from now on." It really seemed to hit home. So I guess it's just this idea of, kids and adults. We're all resistant to somebody lecturing to us, to telling us what they think we should eat. But if you've got a role model that kids really look up to and admire, and unfortunately, so often sports stars are promoting crisps and God knows what, But it worked. We called it Real Fit, Real Food, and we're hoping to roll it out across Wales now if we can get some funding from the Assembly. So anyway.
Can I just
He's sitting next to the government.
You mentioned pot noodles there. Pot noodles, fantastic.
A good Welsh product, so be careful.
I was about to say, we have a pot noodle that comes from Wales, Cocabuto, and it is actually made, and it was launched in Harvey Nichols in London and the People's Supermarket. And what the point is there is this bit about healthy eating, there is this bit about, but actually there are local producers that actually do make food, other than being a healthy apple or whatever. And part of what we have to do in the round is support everybody. So we talked about how you get new products to market. Yeah? This guy couldn't believe it when we went, yes, because we've got a hospital sitting opposite with 1,000 nurses who at the middle of the night are desperate for a pot noodle. If we can get them a UK source, slightly healthier because it's got no additives than whatever pot noodles have, fine. Yeah? And that's part of how we also support an economy. Yeah?
Charlie, you wanted to come in when I cut
I
you short.
wanted to touch on, you touched on pricing, and I think earlier on you touched on the fact that premium brands, or premium pricing in the supermarket applies to fair trade and perhaps organic products. I think this is something that came up. In the independent sector, I think this also happens. I mean, at the big supermarket, you clearly are trying to make food affordable. Go to Borough Market, that simply isn't the case. And you said, it's like in the past people, if you're on the sort of, if you're over less than 50 grand, you can afford to shop at the Borough. And I'll be honest, I know what some of those guys are paying the greengrocers there, and I'm out they're charging what they're marking up. And I think that's a real problem, is good food is seen as elitist, expensive, and belonging to a very small section.
So how do you change that, Charlie?
I saw this at bloody green.
Right.
The independent sector has to learn that so soon.
Can I just say something? It's the Sainsbury's, about 10 days ago, did a big campaign for £1 fruit and veg, buy this for £1. So, with retailers, we went out and bought all the things for £1, put them all up, and I said to Actar and Nelson, can you price match? Yeah? We beat them on every single product, including the New Zealand onions that were 3 for £1. We weighed our onions, we had 3 onions there from Kent, 43 pence. Yeah? So this is when we come back to actually what people are led to believe is being cheap. They're honestly pricing.
Absolutely right.
Everybody knows that phrase, rolling back the prices, but if you do a check, it's not necessarily the case. So the question here.
But I think we have to come to terms with the fact that this is fundamentally a political issue. This isn't just about branding and reputation. We're deeply embedded in a complicated political shift. So when Charlie says the independents have to be less greedy, it is a complete fallacy. Well, it's a fallacy that cheap food in the supermarkets is in fact cheap. The amount of resource that goes into processing and packing, that doesn't go to the producer, it goes to the processes, and it goes to the people who do the branding and the marketing. So when we make strong statements about how we need to change people's behaviours, I think it would be naive of us not to recognise that we're actually trying to challenge some pretty powerful vested interests who make a lot of money out of manipulating our choices.
Absolutely, and I think this was touched on earlier on. Supermarkets have one function only, and that is to make the maximum amount of profit for their shareholders. It is ridiculous to assume they can do anything else. Therefore, sure, from that control, there has to be legislation to control them. You can't ask.
But how are you going to get legislation? But Charlie, how are you going to get legislation when both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are given big donations by supermarkets?
Well, I do remember the Labour Party conference when they were all wearing Safeway tags, yeah, which is very worrying.
I don't know.
No. David?
I think the other thing we need to think about is this change is not going to happen in seconds, in weeks, in months. I was involved in a project in an area of the East End of Glasgow. The average male life expectancy there is 51 years compared to 81 years for the UK average. 30 years less. And that's worse than most third world countries, so-called third world countries, right? This is in our country. And the area is what's called a food desert. There are no supermarkets there. There are no independent food retailers and so forth. So basically fast food city. You know, the people that are selling food are kebab houses and all that kind of stuff. So they put a supermarket into that space that sold fresh produce and focused on fresh produce. They started a campaign in the schools to encourage the children to do it and so on and so forth. Nothing changed. Because the expectation was you put the supermarket and you start educating people and 3 months later off we go, everybody's going to start eating healthy and so forth. You're talking about ingrained, deep-fried Mars bar culture. The risk of buying things that I don't know how to cook when I'm on a low income. I can't afford to take that risk. I can't afford to buy some pasta because I don't really know whether it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes and so on and so forth. I don't have any kind of cooking culture. Myself, my mother, and my mother's mother and so on. So you're actually talking about generational change here. And if we're committed to this, this has to be absolutely massive political, social and business change.
So would you say you can bring all the parties together on this? You think so?
Yes.
Okay. David, do you want to come in on this? Because you touched on this a bit in your speech. You know, the political aspect of this, and the political, with a small p aspect of it.
I think it's bigger than just the Conservative or the Labour Party. From the kind of pan-European policy on food through to UK and regional structures, it's all predicated on the informed consumer. You know, the basic notion is that as long as consumers have all the information at their disposal, they'll then start making different choices and off we go. But it just completely ignores all those sort of structural barriers of experience, income, and accessibility. And so I agree completely. This is a long-run problem.
So the average UK household, only 25% of evening meals tonight will be cooked, at least partially scratch cooked. 75% of this evening's meals will not be prepared in any other sense. The average food preparation time from 1980 was 60 minutes. It's now 18 minutes.
But even eating together is so again, a generation ago, families were still eating at a regular time as a group, in which the behaviours could conceivably be more. Now we're in a world where children and other adults, because of working practices and television and other technologies, they graze. They pass through, pick something up, they nuke it. You can buy kind of ready-made toast these days. And it's almost as bad. It's almost ready-made toast. So people aren't being socialised. Children aren't being socialised in a way that would feed through to the other agenda.
I think one of the questions for me that I've come across is I've been out trying to find competitors. Somebody asked me how much money did you take or do you take? In our first, we've been going since June 1st last year, so almost to June 1st this year, we took just under £1 million turnover. Fantastic, absolutely lovely. We're broke. We haven't got two bloody brass bargains to rub together. Yeah, I sit there every Wednesday when I do the finances, and we literally say who we're paying this week, who we're not paying, because we've got nothing. I went to an investment bank, and I said, look at this, this all looks fantastic. And he went to me, he went, oh yes, and his words were, you were undercapitalised when you started. the shop you've got is too small for what you're actually taking now, yeah? And you're actually you're actually running a slightly different model to anybody else. Congratulations, you're a success. And he was very sincere about that. So we took a legged in, I said, would you lend us some money? Yeah? Straight in. And he said, no. And I said, a bit lost here. And I said, why not? And he said, you're too risky. And I said, hang on a minute, social change, the number of jobs we've created, the number of people we do volunteering. We've got nearly 42 suppliers, of which I think all but 3 you would say were non-national. So these are like, scattered about all over the place. And then he said, no, you're too risky. And I think one of the things is that we still have a society that measures success by finance alone and not by social benefits. And I went back to him after the recent spate of riots in London, and I said, on which elements are you measuring risk now? Yeah? Because you could argue that if you only measure it by cash alone, then that's where we've got to, which comes back to the point of some of the bits driven by capitalism. If you measure it on other bits, then actually it becomes a lot easier for us to change the world. But that is one of the big problems that we've got, is it is still driven by ticking the boxes that relate solely to money and not the boxes that relate to well-being, to health, to family life, whatever your family is, which isn't 2 point whatever kids it is, sitting around the table, or whatever makes you feel comfortable. That is where we have that disconnect still, and that's where the big political question comes in, is how do you actually start to measure what is the risk?
Lady here.
Hello, yes, I'm Carolyn Cheshire, and I'm Arga Queen and Foodie Girl on Twitter. And I'd just like to say, you're talking about early food memories. One of my earliest food memories is the mobile shop. We lived out in the sticks, we were farmers, and the mobile shop coming to us, and my mother having her butter and bacon and bread and stuff brought to us. Now, the mobile shop has completely disappeared, I think, from the country, until just very recently. My sister's just moved back to near where we were both born, and bought an old farmhouse down a mile-long track, and she looks eagerly forward to every Thursday when a new local enterprising chap from Tunbridge Wells has started a mobile shop, and she just rings him up and tells him what she wants, and he brings it to her every Thursday. And I think that's just absolutely brilliant. It's like sort of a mobile village shop. And also where I am, there are 2 sets of small-scale, very small-scale market gardeners who not just are they doing the farmers' markets, but they are also going to particular pitches at each day of the week, a pub car park or a village green in all our surrounding little tiny hamlets and villages, where you can be sure that they will be, and you can go and just pitch up there between certain hours to buy your fruit and vegetables. And we have a fish man who comes to the village green once a week from Grimsby. He lives locally, but he fetches his fish from Grimsby. So there's all this sort of business, like sort of food coming to you. And people trot along with their children when they're picking them up off the school bus. They take them along to buy their vegetables and buy their fish. And that's all part of food memories. That's my food memory.
Yeah, food memory, and it's coming back. I remember a similar thing from where my grandma lived. Let's see, for those of you who have come from far and wide to join us here today, has anyone had any experience of this kind of thing? Just hands up. Who's got a mobile shop or a mobile fish and chip or a mobile anything in their area? Yeah. Oh, so it's not happening. There we are. What have we got? Mobile library, would you like? There. Next. Fish, cheese, same. And what have you got? Mobile bread. Well, there we are. Some ideas.
Can I just, a quick question, what's the difference between a mobile shop and me ringing up Tesco and saying home deliver everything I want?
In this instance, the mobile shop man is going to the local bakery and buying the local bread, and he's going to the local butcher and the local vegetable people. It's all local food, actually grown and produced and made in the area. It's not come from God knows where.
There you are. You've got your answer.
Thank you. I'll try and be quick. Some fascinating sort of insights, and one of the things that strikes me, I've always been suspicious about, is the political mantra about choice. My own belief is that people actually want good, and I think the Waitrose example recently, I think the Essential range, I don't think it's been going very long, but I heard recently it's taking over 30% of all of the everything they sell now. and that's basically about one thing that's good value. You know, it's got the Waitrose brand, etc. In my architectural world, people talked about sustainable buildings. Why aren't developers? It's the developers' fault. We always like to blame other people. It's the developers' fault. The developer says people aren't prepared to pay for sustainable, you know, more better insulated, better materials, etc. Sustainable buildings. It's only government regulation that actually makes wholesale change, in my experience, in my view. And I just wanted to ask the panel, what one government regulation or planning regulation, whatever, would you like to see introduced?
Charlie, you go first.
Well,
with all of you,
this
so get
would be
thinking.
possible, but imagine if supermarkets were told to spend 10% of their budget, i.e., hand 10% of what you're spending back to the management store and go and get something within 40 miles. You mean fish and cheese.
Why 10%?
Why not? I don't know. 10%.
It's a starting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what would you deem as local?
It depends where you are. I mean, obviously, if you're in the centre of London, 30 miles wouldn't work. But outside of London, I think it's 30 to 50 miles, something like that. In London, obviously, it's going to include probably other counties.
Right, Simon, what one thing would you change?
So, how do you stop people smoking? You put the price up, you put the tax up. Every time there's a tax hike, a subsequent proportion of the population stops smoking. So there's plenty of mechanics that government can employ. So to create a situation where the branded pot noodles cost more than the local noodles, that's quite an easy thing to actually engineer if you want to try and engineer. Because you very rightly talked about influencing our choices and all that kind of stuff. There's ways and means. This is what interests me. Is that I know an awful lot about marketing. At the moment, it's to market Coca-Cola, but wouldn't it be interesting if you could transfer some of those skills to some of the retailers and manufacturers that could actually make a positive change?
David?
I confessed earlier to being an economist, so I immediately divvy this up into supply and demand side stuff. I think the regulations happen on the demand side, because it's only when we choose that we can really make it happen. It's back to the responsibility thing. But you can't regulate us in quite the same way. So I will be looking for where are sources of demand which government could control to force that demand to change its behaviour. So my kind of direct answer is I would require every school, every local authority, every prison, every hospital, every government-controlled entity to meet some target or requirement for X% of the food has to come from within 30 miles, and Y% of all contracts associated with providing that food have to be from organisations with fewer than 250 employees.
David, thank you. And in fact, any of you who've been watching Twitter lately may have noticed that question about public procurement was raised in the room earlier, and I think it might be something that some of you want to bring up with the Government Minister, John Griffiths, when he comes, although it isn't strictly, I don't think, within his remit, is it?
No.
But they're all a cabinet, and they all love each other, so that's all fine. Kate, quickly, one thing.
So many. I think for me, it would be actually relaxing of some of the criteria that you need to access funding to get some of these things off the ground. I'm a great believer in that social enterprise, which has no legal standing, is the way forward. But accessing money, I think, is currently one of the biggest things that we've got to stop and change.
There was a message on Twitter suggesting that you might go to Triodos Bank or the Co-op.
They didn't, neither of them, when we originally went, would support us.
Would they not? Okay, question here. Charles, yes.
Just to say that we're setting up shop, as you know, copying basically what you do, and then the local council which has got some funding from the mayor, of which a portion is for social enterprises. So there are things.
Okay. Lovely, thank you.
Hi, Fran Robinson, Ledbury Food Group. Just taking this back from the sort of global into the more local, one of the issues that one of you mentioned was about people's comfort in their shopping environment. And of course, we've all now been kind of educated to shop in supermarkets, that ain't going to stop. But what we in Ledbury are looking at is how can we draw people out from the supermarkets to get back into the high street to shop there? Because it actually, for a lot of people, it's not a comfort zone. So, any ideas on that?
Can't it be a gradual thing? You're saying you're not going to stop people going to supermarkets, but people don't particularly like being in supermarkets because of the you might be able to, how do you tempt people back onto the high street?
Absolutely, because for many people it's no longer a comfort zone. It's not something that's comfortable to shop in a butcher's or a greengrocer's because they've forgotten how to do that, or they've never done that, or they've not been
I
educated.
actually put forward a proposal because I lived in the lovely town, city of Worcester for a while, and quite recently I put forward to a large property company that we could actually, the Beef Supermarket idea is transferable to a parade of shops. I think the key thing though is that you must always look at these things as a money-making organisation and a business. You cannot think of them as being a charity because that does no good to anybody. Yeah? So I think when you talk about how you get people back to shopping, you have to give them the shops that they want. But you also, if you like, our USP is the fact that our members, we talked about the best thing is recommendation, you know, the fact that Cypher brought his dad in means that we had access to a whole community that we didn't have, because he's an elder in the Bangladeshi community. So I think the USP is getting people to do it. But please, please make sure you think of it as something that is going to be commercially successful, because you will not be able to achieve the social regeneration, the environmental work that you want to do.
Isn't it also about customer service? Because Charlie, if I came to a greengrocer's shop, I could say, what on earth do I do with that? So I tried cooking that and it went tough. Whereas they're not going to tell me that in the supermarket.
No, they're not.
Should our local stores be better?
That's certainly important. I think much more crucial than that, much simpler. There's a fantastic new butcher that's open in Bristol. I don't know anyone else says from Bristol, Ruby and White. They're open till 9 o'clock at night. So people can shop on the way home. And they just think how that in the supermarkets.
Exactly. The reason why people go to supermarkets is convenience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shopping is not an enjoyable experience for most people. So the chore of going to the butchers, the greengrocers and all that kind of stuff, I can save time doing something
But
I
isn't
don't
that more
really want to do.
enjoyable than going down an aisle with horrible red everywhere and bright? No?
So it's about parking and it's about what we're open house.
Okay.
We open 8 till 10.
That's certainly got to have a fact, hasn't it? And loads of hands zooming up everywhere. So why don't we collect some questions? I'll basically walk from each one of the other, and then one of you pick up while I go to the next one, so we can get everybody in.
Quite a lot of this seems to be about having the confidence to be different, in terms of like buying soup that's been made in the store, that type of thing. But how do we get enough people to act together to be confident to be different?
David. Simon, I don't mind, one of you.
I don't know.
Come on, Simon, how do you get people to act to be different? You don't want to. You look at the different.
There's a weird history of kind of collective consumer action. There do seem to be some areas of human behaviour where we seem happy to collaborate, and then other areas where we kind of tend to do it on our own. And shopping, narrowly conceptualised, tends to be something that you do for you and your direct family. So there isn't much history of acting in a kind of collaborative or collective way. And I think things like the supermarket, things like this are kind of real, live, important experiments in how to do that.
I mean, that's one way we could do it is just use the alternatives, use the independent shop, use the local market. If you have.
I think the thing is though, what you could argue one of the reasons why we're successful is because we ain't that different. You know how to shop in it. It's a convenient shop. What we do is different. How we got the dream is different to one of the big fours. But we're just enough normal, just enough on the normal side to be able to go through the door.
Just going back to changing people's attitudes and changing people's behaviour. Interestingly, I've been working with parents, mums that come from low-income families in Ludlow. They do exist, talking about, I'm odd, I was an early adopter, okay, but these people, it's on their doorstep essentially, local food, and they choose not to buy it, okay, and they don't know how to cook, and I've been working with them, and I think basically it's a language thing. I don't talk about local food, I don't talk about organic, things like that. I talk about the fact that things taste better if you buy things in season. I talk about seasonality, the fact that you can save money if you buy strawberries in season. And apples, when you chop them in half, they're not rotten in the middle when you buy them in season. And it's going back to some basics, and it's teaching them how to cook from scratch as well. You can save yourself money on this ridiculous amount of pasta sauces you get in supermarkets by just doing this fat and tuber, and it takes less than 20 minutes if that. So it's kind of and they're all things that are beginning to sort of click in their minds and saying, why have I been putting up with bad veg and fruit for so long? It's a supermarket syndrome, isn't it? And it's kind of like, thankfully, you know, there are still some independent greengrocers in Ludlow, there's still, you know, thriving farmers market and all the rest of it. So, it, you know, it's on their doorstep, but they choose not to, you know, they drive down the road to Morrison's because it's, you know, it's Leominster, it's amazing, you know.
There are some one shops up there. And one of the things I noticed is I think they're very good value. But is it perception, you're saying? Is it people think, oh, that's posh, it must be expensive? I'll go down to Tesco's.
There is, yes.
Is that kind of...
You're lucky that Abergavenny. That's another question.
But I feel also a bit disingenuous to people. They give so many mixed messages. You know, when I started off, Arthur, who's an incredible, he knows more eco-chefs than I think we've got in this room. And I went along and I met what I would call the equivalent of the food fascist police. And when we talked about the stock we're going to sell, and they said to me, you surely can't be selling Cocoa Pops. I said, if Cocoa Pops sell, we'll be selling Cocoa Pops. And somebody almost spat on me in that meeting. And I turned to her and I said, look, if I'm being told I have to send my child to school with breakfast, let me give them Cocoa Pops in the first instance. Yeah? Then I can move to a healthy breakfast. But let me just do one thing at a time. The same person, when we talked about what we do with apples, yeah? And I said we just won't sell them. She said, well, what you can do is you teach people what to do with apples. They could then bottle them and they can give apple puree to their child to take to school. I mean, have you ever been down the East End?
That's going to happen down, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Well, in Brixton, you know, is this really going to happen? Yeah? And it's that kind of reality check that I think sometimes we just...
It's closing a divide, isn't it?
It's a social divide, but it's also, let's just tackle one message at a time. If the message is eat breakfast, let's just stick to eat breakfast.
I think, I just go back to Ludlow for a second, and touch on what you were saying. I always remember Jonathan Mead said years ago, I used to write at the Times, he said, the thing about Ludlow, yes, it's fantastic, but it doesn't prove that we have a food culture, it proves the opposite. If we make such a fuss about it, it's because everywhere else is so dreadful. In France, everywhere's like this.
But we're now in Abergavenny, famous for the food
Yes, this was
festival,
written
Gateway, and we have no
It's
fishmongers.
getting
We have no
better.
fishmongers. You know, it's happening everywhere. Anyway.
Yeah, tenuous connection I'm trying to make to link my question in with everything else. But it's the thing of, you know, we need to look for solutions that will work over the longer term. So I lived in South America for a number of years, and I was there when the first Tesco's arrived in La Paz, Bolivia. It was really sad. What I want to know is, how do we make us understand that the food culture in Africa and in South America is our future, and not that our food culture here is their future? Because at the moment they're aspiring to what we've got, which is pretty sad, and we should be aspiring to their collective methods of selling, their sort of culture of 50 sticks, different varieties of sweet corn and that sort of thing. How can we do that? And maybe it's related, because this is something I wanted to know, to the hats thing.
And David, I think we should bring David into this because, of course, we're having this discussion while the global economy is in a rather turbulent, if not collapsing state. I mean, are we going to be having, for economic reasons, to eat in South America?
Possibly. I mean, you could say some of it's already started. You know, food prices have been rising over the last 3-5 years after 50 years of falling. You know, I think we're beginning to see evidence of dramatic, worrying malnutrition in the UK again relatively recently after basically disappearing. I don't like the idea of thinking that the way you cast it was very interesting in terms of, I think most people, when they think about the food that they might have to be eating under conditions of poverty, how will happen in their brains. And that's my
It's one kind of poverty. I mean, they have massive abundance if you measure it in the kinds of ways that you can talk.
Absolutely.
But
That's why I think
of necessity, they're constructed in completely different ways.
But if you look at the aspirations, if you go to markets like Thailand, for example, you know, there's a tradition of wonderful food, open web markets, all that kind of stuff. People aspire to go shopping in Big C, which is the Carrefour brand, or on the Tesco ramen stores. And in the UK, we don't aspire to go shopping in a little mum and pop store that's grubby, as they were. And then if you go to a mum and pop store over there, so I think it's basically saying, okay, we don't have to go back to having, you know, the greengrocer of the past kind of thing. It's why do people go to supermarkets? It's convenience, parking, all that kind of stuff. It's actually thinking about, let's invent the new solution rather than just trying to mimic something that is
And Simon, we'll have to leave it at that point. If anyone's wondered why Andy Sprackett's put revolt on the telemarketer thing, it's because I just signed in that I'm not taking any more questions. And I know there's at least 7 people who are going to hate me and spike my lunch. Don't blame me, blame Miller Research. We will have to bring this debate to a course out. They've been clunking the cutlery for the last quarter of an hour. The whole reason why we've got these tables, by the way, is so that you can continue this conversation and debate over your food. They're continuing at this table. So please don't see this as a stifling debate, but you're going to do it with your mouths full. Please enjoy your lunch, and as you queue up, think of these tomatoes here on the front. I would give anyone a fiver if any of the supermarkets sell any at any price as good as these. And they were grown by the Bevan family, not Kate's family, another Bevan, in Llandwyn, rather 5 miles from here. Real local food, try one. Have lunch.